Maintenant la séance. Welcome to meeting number 148 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. Before I begin, I'd like to ask all members to take notice of the little card that's right before them so as to prevent audio feedback incidents. Il en va de la santé et de la sécurité de tous, particulièrement des interprètes. Conformément à la motion.
Pursuant to the motion adopted on November 7, 2024, the committee is commencing its study of the examination of telecommunication companies' service contract practices. We're pleased to welcome our witness today by video conference. Can we please have the members up on the screen to just 1 second, dear witnesses? So we're pleased to welcome our witness today by video conference from Rogers Communications, Brett Leach, President of Residential Services. Just before, I know Mr. Massey and Mr. Perkins who'd like to take the floor, so I'll give the floor to Mr. Massey first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the committee members and the witness for being here. But this is not consistent with my original motion that was passed on this committee, what's taking place today. And with that, I have a notice of motion that I would like to pass and get a discussion going right away because it's consistent with what was originally decided upon. And second of all, I think it's germane to what takes place for this meeting thereafter. And I have submitted the motion and would like to read it into the record. That consistent with the motion passed by this committee on Monday, October 28th, 2024, the committee invite, and if this invitation is not accepted, summons persistent to Standing Order 1081, Rogers Communications Inc. Chief Executive Officer Tony Stafarier to appear before the committee for a minimum of 2 hours by December 12th, 2024. And with that, I've built the motion so that it can actually drop the component from invite to accepted and just go to direct summons. And I'd like to be able to speak to this motion, if I can, briefly, in the sense that we had specifically requested a course of action to take place, and I did pass that in this chamber, in this committee. Subsequently, there was an alteration to it. But now we've been left with we have Mr. Leach in front of us who was not invited to this meeting and is a substitute at the very last moment. That is unacceptable, in my opinion, not only just to this committee, but also I think Canadians and consumers. I think it's part of a play on the committee and avoiding accountability. It was the date that I originally passed, if you remember, Mr. Chair, actually was for the previous month, but we gave exceptional time and leverage to Rogers Communications and to them to actually choose a date, which they did, so that the CEO could be here for the practices of hidden billing that is taking place and has been identified as a real concern amongst Canadians. And they, at the last minute, did a rope-a-dope on this committee. They switched out the witness, and today I really don't have much interest in questioning Mr. Leach. What I have an interest in is having the CEO here as I proposed and was passed by this committee. So with that, I would like us to move into that discussion and to see if we can get consensus because I don't believe today's meeting is going to be very worthwhile at all with regards to the objective that was originally sought after in my motion, which was passed by this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. And I have MP Rempel-Garner and then MP Perkins on my list, or however you want to decide. But just to give you a bit of context, colleagues, and although we appreciate you, Mr. Leach, taking the time and joining us this morning. We did accommodate for a little longer time frame so as to have Mr. Staffieri appear before the committee, and we extended what was originally planned in the motion. And it is my understanding as chair that we had a firm agreement that Mr. Staffieri would appear before this committee today to discuss the matter at hand. And it's important. Changes were made at the last minute, indeed, and this is an opportunity to answer to Canadians through the members of the committee. So that is the context of this motion, as I understand it. So I'll now yield the floor to MP Rempel-Garner.
Would it be possible for myself and Mr. Perkins just to switch our speaking slots? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Massey, for moving forward. It was your original study and motion on this important thing to go forward. And to reiterate, this is the third time we've been stiffed by Mr. Staffieri. He decided, we invited him in January, February. He refused, sent other underlings. And then I think when I tabled a summons motion within 48 hours before that appearance, he decided to come. We did it a second time in February. There was another appearance. Again, he sent other underlings and didn't come. The third time is this one. I think it's unacceptable that Mr. Staffieri thinks it's more important to do whatever it is he's doing than to be accountable to Parliament for the company that he is the CEO of. However, as some of my committee members, I'm not perhaps as gentle as Mr. MP Massey, so I would propose the following amendment to Mr. Massey's motion, which is to delete everything after the committee. The motion currently reads that consistent with the motion passed by this committee on Monday, October 28, 2024, the committee, I would delete everything after that and replace it with summons Rogers Communications Chief Executive Officer Tony Staffieri and the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer Navdeep Bains to appear before the committee for a minimum of 2 hours within 7 days following the adoption of this motion. That should the witnesses refuse to appear within 7 days, the committee make the following interim report to the House. Your committee wishes to admonish Rogers Communications Chief Executive Officer Tony Staffieri for failing to make himself available to the committee despite being invited by the committee on October 28, 2024, then later summoned on November 28, 2024, and that the committee insists that this witness in hiding appear before the committee for 2 hours before the House recess for the Christmas break.
Okay. This is a lengthy amendment. Is it possible to send it around so that members can... Yeah, so it's basically the text of the motion you had prepared, Mr. Perkins, so perhaps we can distribute that and members will see what you're referring to.
Yeah, and it just comes in after Mr. Massey's one, which was a little different than the one that was tabled or not given on notice.
Okay, so I'll just give a second for the clerk to distribute it. And now I have on the amendment.
Just further finish on that. The reason obviously is look, if this happens once, perhaps within a 2 weeks period, a CEO of one of Canada's largest companies, 2 to 3 weeks, might not be able to find the time to get on the private jet and fly here. But this is not fool me once, fine, fool me twice. It's a habit. This is a habit of this CEO not wanting to be accountable to Parliament, and I've had enough. It's disrespect to our democratic process. He may not think much of our democratic process, and I can understand why he doesn't think much, because we tried to hold them account for these outrageous things like jacking up the price of a rental box for your Wi-Fi or your cable by $7 a month when you have a fixed rate contract. I understand that, and it's no offense to our witness here who probably runs the business as his executive team wants him to gouge customers on fine print. But Mr. Staffieri is ultimately the guy who's accountable to the board. If he's not willing to go, I think maybe we'll summons Edward Rogers next if we continue this habit of this company defying Parliament. They are, by the way, the most expensive cell phone company in the world. I know I don't have to tell Canadians that. They know that. But if you don't believe me, believe the international comparison study that's about 800 pages of cell phone companies around the world called Rewheel. We have copies of it on our side. We could probably get one from the industry department for some other folks if they wanted it. But it's quite damning on every package size, on every cell phone company in every world, that Rogers continues to consistently be the most expensive. So I guess that's perhaps why, if that's not bad enough on their rates, they bury in the side, in the fine print, other unlimited charges that they can jack up when some customer signs a fixed rate contract. They usually think that means fixed rate for 2 years. That if you're going to pay $100 for your cell phone with all the bells and whistles, about twice what you would pay in the U.S., that somehow that fee won't change during the 2 years. Or that when you pick your bundled package with your cable box, that's on a fixed rate. That's how they're marketed. They're marketed as a fixed rate. You know, we'll give you this great deal. Put all this together, bundle it together, and this is what you're going to pay every month. Except if you're a Rogers customer, apparently you've got to read the 42 pages of fine print they send you in the email contract, because they don't print out paper ones anymore when you go in their store. And buried in that is the escape valves. So Mr. Staffieri has to be held accountable for this. He has to stop thumbing his nose at Parliament, and he has to come here and be accountable for the actions of the company he leads.
Merci, Mr. Perkins. Madame Rempel-Garner.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Madame Rempel-Garner.
So I'll speak in support of this amendment. So, colleagues, the situation that we have in front of us today is this is the third time that the CEO of a company that receives significant benefit from the Canadian government, both through tax incentives, direct contributions, as well as a regulatory environment that makes it difficult for new entrants to come into the market. This is the third time that that CEO has thumbed his nose at this committee. I think, colleagues, that what we are experiencing here is much like the service that Rogers provides to its customers, which we were going to investigate with the CEO today. I know in my inbox, I'm sure many of you as well, cross-party lines, frequently receive complaints from our constituents, specifically with regard to this company, its customer service, a feeling of helplessness and frustration. And the behavior of the CEO towards our committee, towards parliamentarians, in a committee that has a mandate to oversee at least part of the regulations and regulatory environment that it operates in, it's just, they think we're stupid, colleagues. They really do. So, I'll just, Mr. Chair, I'll direct my comments perhaps to the GR and legal team that are watching this from Rogers. I cannot believe they did this. Like, did they really think that there would be no consequence to telling us that their CEO couldn't come? Like, actually think about this. Those people, Chair, actually said, oh, no, he doesn't. This committee doesn't matter. I want to be very clear to those people, Chair. There is a desire to ensure that there is competitiveness in this particular area. I have had concerns about this particular company since the government approved the merger of it with Shaw. But for the CEO to just blow us off 3 times, like he blows off his consumers on a regular basis, is I'll put it this way: it's been noticed. It's been noticed, and it's been noticed, I know, in my party. And certainly my colleagues and I are thinking about, well, how would we approach the regulatory environment should at some point in the future we form government? And to be just blown off at the last minute by the CEO, well, it makes one want to reciprocate that behavior, doesn't it? But that's not how Parliament should function. So I think that I know that like Mr. Perkins' amendment, and I'm talking to my colleagues in the Bloc and the NDP particularly, it might, it says, look, if he doesn't come by this date, we are going to admonish, essentially we're going to admonish him in Parliament. That type of escalation, given that he's blown this committee off 3 times, I think is warranted at this point. I think that we need to send a message, this committee needs to send a message to Canadian consumers that we're on their side, not the side of the CEO. We're done with this obfuscation. And that's, so I feel that if we're not accepting that amendment today, if we're not saying we're prepared to escalate, we're essentially just saying, like, we're like Lucy holding the football with Charlie Brown. I appreciate I'm aging myself with that reference, but that's really what we're doing here. And I think we need to send a message to this company that we're done. We're done. Again, Chair, through you, like to the GR and legal teams that are, I am done with this. I cannot believe that they wasted my time today. Yes. I cannot believe that they wasted my time. And now that we're wasting committee time, because they did this to me. That says that they don't respect me as a parliamentarian, and that's something that I'll remember when they try to get meetings with us and come up to us at events and go, oh, hey, girl, how's it going? Haven't seen you in a while. It's like, well, I haven't seen you in a while. If you don't have the ability to respect the committee time by saying what we do, why should we respect you? And it's the same transaction with its customers, and it's the feeling of frustration that its customers has with this company as well too. So I wanted to put that on the record, Chair. I want to ask my colleagues with the NDP and the Bloc particularly to consider this amendment because it is justified escalation. I fully expect. Here's my rationale. I fully expect the CEO to blow us off again. I don't have a lot of. They will blow us off again. So then we're going to have to spend more taxpayer dollars and more committee time doing Mr. Perkins' motion again in the future. So I would suggest that we send a strong message today and say we're done. We're done with you wasting our time. And I think that this could have been an opportunity for the Rogers CEO to put a positive message forward. But here we are. It could have. There was no intent to be hostile here. It was more like, why are you doing this? It was and so for him to blow us off 3 times, it says you do not respect this committee, you do not respect Parliament, and frankly, you don't respect government. So why should we respect you? We have to imply motive at this point in time because of the actions of this man. Unbelievable. Please support this amendment.
Thank you. Just colleagues on my list, I have MP Patzer, MP Massé, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, Monsieur Généreux, et Monsieur Aria, et Monsieur Badaway. Monsieur Patzer.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is pretty wild to think that this is the 3rd time that we are here today with the wrong guest before us. That this individual, Mr. Staffieri, would think that this is okay. But like Mr. Rempel-Garner was saying, it gets back to respect, right? The respect for authority, the respect for these institutions that we have within Parliament here. And there's respect for Canadians at the end of the day, right? It's respect for the person who is paying the bills so that this CEO has the ability to live the life that he lives, to take the salary that he takes. And this is the way that he's going to treat his customer base and the rest of Canadians and Parliament. It's disrespectful. I feel disrespected. I know my colleagues do. And I can't even imagine what the individuals who have been caught off guard and who are surprised by the changes to their bills, how they feel about this, right? The fact that this guy has been afforded the opportunity to come multiple times to committee and try to clarify or explain what's going on, what the business decision is. As a Blue Jays fan, maybe I was hoping that he would come to committee and tell us that they're trying to make a full court press on Juan Soto. But I don't think that that's the reason, the rationale for this. I think it's a completely different thing. So it's absolutely wild. I used to work in telecoms, and I can tell you there was a point in time too where the company I worked for would sell people an item, and then I would have to go and set it up, and then you get there, you go through all the work. Person tries it out and they're like, well, this isn't working the way that I was promised that it would work. And the company actually, so that was frustrating as a person who was working on the ground. But the company took the initiative to try to be more transparent in the sales process, to try to be really upfront with the consumer that, look, you bought this. This is what you can potentially expect, because at the time they're offering an up to service instead of a guaranteed rate service. So being more transparent with consumers is what this boils down to when it comes to the original issue at hand. Was the cost of bilking people who were in a fixed term contract of extra money every month without even telling them. Like, imagine the callousness, not even send them a month's notice or whatever, saying that your bills are going to go up by this much a month. Not even an advance notice. Like, again, that is so disrespectful to the people who are paying those bills, the people who signed on the dotted line saying that, hey, for this much money, I am locking in and guaranteeing a price. To find out that that's not the case, is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So I think this is absolutely appropriate because the level of disrespect that the CEO is showing to Parliament, to Canadians, to ratepayers, to this institution is unbelievable. And I think this motion, this amendment here, the original motion Mr. Massey put forward is good. This amendment, I think, strengthens it. And I think it's important that we vote in favor of this amendment. I look forward to doing so. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, MP Patzer. I have MP Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to my colleagues, and thanks to Mr. Perkins to put forth his amendment as well. Too, it is, acknowledgedly more, involved than mine. That's why I built mine simply. That could also get at the piece of, invitation just right out of there, because I had the suspicion that other members of this committee would be equally enraged with regards to how this has been treated, because every time that we delay this, and I think Madame Michelle Rempel-Gardner mentioned about the cost of Canadians and the delays, and the cost of this committee, I should say, in Parliament, but also too, these practices daily cost Canadians, and that's significant as well. My original intent to get at this issue was what was taking place. It was well identified by the Rogers team, but it's a practice that also is partially in some parts of other type of operators. So I want to get to the issue, and that's why I wanted to follow specifically up on this. So with the amendment that's been proposed, I'm just wondering with Mr. Perkins, I really don't care to hear more excuses from Mr. Baines. Been around here long enough, even with him as minister, to hear enough excuses on different things, and that doesn't really get to the issue and the decision making that I think is necessary. I mean, it's clear that there's probably advice coming from Mr. Baines to the whole Rogers team on how to deal with Parliament and so forth. And be quite frank, I don't feel either way about that situation. I mean, we can have him here or not have him here, but the reality is, for me, I know what's going to happen is I'm going to hear a whole litany, an inventory of excuses from that, and I just prefer to get to the source. And I think actually, I agree, Mr. Perkins, that maybe we do need to talk to Edward Rogers at this point. I mean, I remember the Rogers family quite differently when I started in this place to where it's at right now. It used to be a Canadian icon with regards to building itself in radio telecommunications in particular, and now it's, I mean, this weasel language that's now put in there is certainly very difficult for people to accept, especially when they're on fixed budgets, incomes, and have expectations. But to go back to your amendment, I would like to test the waters to see whether or not we could just go right to the source of where we started with this with Mr. Stefari, and then as well, I just want to hear some clarification in terms of procedural wise about the relation to going to the Commons. I don't have a copy of your. I have a copy of your original one that you sent in last night. This one that you're proposing here is a little bit more involved, so I'm waiting to see if we're going to get a copy of that. But I'm open to those ideas. But or secondarily to that, having that as an immediate backup, if we did want to report back to the House later on as well too. And then just a notation, just maybe not to the end of Christmas, but the end of Parliament scheduled sitting. Might be, I had put in by December 12th, but we could report anytime before Parliament. So with that, those are kind of my questions and concerns. And I just want to point out too, is that we don't have unlimited time on this. And so I'm hoping that we can get at least some consensus amongst your sub-amendment, Mr. Perkins. And I don't know where the Liberals are at this, but it's clear that, until we have him here, and this is what we were supposed to be here about, then we're treading water. And I'll just complete with that and hear for what other members are saying.
Okay, thank you, MP Massey. So if I understand correctly, you're not suggesting a sub-amendment, just wanting to float the idea of perhaps going back to the original motion, which was to invite Tony Staffieri, and also you had some issue with maybe the delays, so within 7 days, perhaps until December 12th. But and I understand there's been maybe a mismatch between what we've received as paper copies here in the room and what you've gotten.
Suspend?
What you've gotten by email, that's not a bad idea. I think we'll suspend very briefly, just so that you get the proper. Ça vous dérange d'attendre, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay? Just
Do you mind waiting, Mr. Savard-Tremblay, just to make sure we all have the same information?
will be sent, Mr. Massé, because I think there's been a mistake in what's been sent. So,
Mais en fait, mon intervention serait vraiment pas, serait pas sur le.
My remarks weren't to get into the substance. I just wanted to propose, insofar as Mr. Leach, nobody seems to want to hear from him. We can just release him if everyone agrees.
to letting Mr. Leach go, given I don't think we'll get to his testimony, or I see no.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Massé.
Yeah, no, I propose to keep Mr. Leach here in case there isn't consensus on this, and I would specifically then just say that part of my amendment would be to remove Mr. Baines from it, but I don't really, again, I mean, I'm just trying to feel the room out here. At the end of the day, if we have to have Mr. Baines here, I'm okay with that too, but I would suggest we keep the witness here so they can see exactly what they're doing. You know.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a feeling. That they'll just hang up on all the people watching from Rogers will hang up.
Thank you, Mr. Massé. I'll use my my discretion as chair, given I feel like we've got a full committee here, and we had an agreement that Mr. Staffieri would appear before this committee. This is a waste of MP's time and resources of the House, and it's not to be taken lightly when you're supposed to be accountable to Canadians through members of Parliament. And I think that's what happened today. So I will err on your side, Mr. Massé, and say, Mr. Leach, if you can report back to Rogers what you've heard today, I think it's useful to be here.
Chair.
Yes, Mr.
I prefer
Area.
the witness to stay here so that he can get back the entire sentiments of this committee back to his CEO.
100%, I agree. And we appreciate you being here, that being said. So I will briefly suspend so that members get the amendment proposed by Mr. Perkins. We'll get back in a minute, okay? Meeting suspended. and it's my understanding, MP Massé, that you've received the motion. So basically, from what I understand, the amendment proposed by Mr. Perkins was that we keep the first sentence of your motion, but after October 28, 2024, the committee, then we go to summons Rogers Communications CEO Tony Staffieri, and then the rest of the motion, the rest of the amendment reads as the motion that Mr. Perkins had given notice for. So I think that explains it. I'll give you back the floor, Mr. Massé, because you had the floor when we suspended. And you're on mute.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just negotiating two screens here with the amendment in front of me. I know I appreciate the motion sub-amendment. My suggestion to the mover of this is to remove Baines from it, and the rest is fine with me. I just don't want another distraction, to be quite frank, and that's really what I think it is. And that's why I prefer to go back to the where we started from, and I'll put that out there and to try to find some consent amongst all of us here on this, and leave it at that, and see if Mr. Perkins is okay with that. And
thank you, Mr. Massin. Given you're not in the room, I will read what you're saying as I suggest a sub-amendment, which would be to remove Mr. Baines. And I'm reading the room, and I think there is consent for removing Navdi Baines from the motion. I see no objection, so I gather your sub-amendment is accepted, Mr. Massé. So that brings us to the amendment as sub-amended by Mr. Massé, and I will go back to the list that I had. So on the motion now, on the amendment, and you're all good with the sub-amendment proposed. Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, est-ce que tout est clair? Donc, c'est vous qui aviez le plancher à ce stade-ci pour l'amendement tel que sous-amendé.
Tel que sous-amendé,
as sub-amended. That is, we remove Mr. Baines, but we keep that your committee would like to admonish Rogers. I agree with the amendment as a sub-amendment, and I also agree with removing Mr. Baines, who we know very well here at the committee, a former industry minister, and I know he's very good at avoiding answering questions, all the more so since Mr. Staffieri, who is the CEO and doesn't want to lower himself to waste time with simple members of parliament. And so I definitely don't want to dilute that part of the motion. So I accept the sub-amendment amendment. Thank you, Thank you, member. Mr. General.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo what's been said so far on the sub-amendment, that Mr. Savard-Tremblay just said it. We are, from the point of view from the CEO of such a big company, we're just lowly members of parliament, but the Canadian democracy functions in such a way that the people we represent, that is the Canadian people, the Canadian population, have a voice, and we're here to represent them. And so at the very least, this man should meet us here at the committee. Moreover, I'd like to add that Mr. Anado, who is CEO of also a large group in the same sector, always comes to committee. I have great respect for the fact, and even though we're not in the same political family at all, but at least he respects the requests of the committee to appear here, and it's also in line with the service the company tries to provide to their customer base. Yes, Mr. Pelado, I think he'd like to come here every month if he could. Mr. Aria.
Mr. Chair, I think this is a very important discussion and the important motion brought by Mr. Perkins. Canadians may not be aware that Rogers, Bell, and TELUS are not just ordinary Canadian companies. They are sort of protected, cuddled for a long time, and people may not know that under Canadian law, any telecom company which has got market share more than 10% has to have 80% Canadian ownership and 80% of board members. And in 2012, the then government amended so that the telecom companies with less than 10% market share can have increased foreign ownership. So that still left Rogers, Bell, and TELUS in control of this market, and Canadians are getting squeezed. We have heard about the pricing, but let me talk about the technical quality. We are in a G7 country, capital of the G7 country, and here my service provider has got 1 bar. And whenever we travel abroad, when we don't have telecom services, we go and look for Wi-Fi. Some of my colleagues are happy. They've got 2 bars. Great, lucky you. Okay, 1. But whenever we travel abroad, when we don't have telecom facilities, we go in search of Wi-Fi. And here in national capital of a G7 country, with only 3 providers, sometimes I have to go to surf the net or to look at something online. I have to go in search of Wi-Fi. So this is unacceptable. We are not talking about, not getting quality access underground, deep underground in the parking garages, but we are talking about the regular building. And here in this parliamentary precinct, that is the heart of Canadian democracy. So the telecom companies have been too protected. I think this production is outdated, harmful, with no competition. It stifles innovation. However, with the changing global scenario, where the international free trade is dead, and all countries are adopting protectionist measures. So I don't know where to draw a line to protect the domestic companies. But when these domestic companies are abusing the protection provided to them, and what to do about it? Maybe it's time to relax the foreign direct investment rule that can allow the trusted allies like the 5 partners to bring in competition so that they can invest in telecom sector in Canada, irrespective of the market share, or whether they can buy out the existing firms or not. My understanding is that this is the 3rd time the CEO of Rogers is thumbing his nose to this committee. This committee is an important committee for industry. It's a committee for industry and technology. And if he thinks that he has got political connections that can prevent him from appearing before the committee, he is wrong. If required, summons be issued, but I suggest the motion saying that, let's submit an interim report. Assuming that he will not answer the summons, I think that is wrong. Let's take the next logical step available to us. That is, we issue a summons if he refuses to appear next time. And if he refuses, then we can take what is required next. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Area, are you proposing a sub-amendment? And I'll just to be in the interest of clarity, though, the motion does read that should the witness refuse to appear, then a report. So just to be clear.
Again, Mr. Chair, my thing is that what we can do is that he has refused to appear. Let's send in the summons, and if it doesn't, then I think we should go ahead with this.
Okay, so this is a sub-amendment you're proposing, Mr. Area.
If that is the case, that is the sub-amendment I'm proposing.
So how would it read then if we look at the proposed amendment?
I think we have already adopted.
The second part would be removed. That should the witness refuse to appear within 7 days.
My thing is that should the witness refuse to appear within 7 days, then the committee may issue summons. The original thing is summons. My thing is that he has refused. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think we should stop there.
Point of order, Chair.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be in order because essentially what Mr. Arya is doing is trying to amend the motion back to its original form. So
I will disagree because the original form called to invite. So what I understand from Mr. Arya, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're fine with the committee issuing a summons. You just want to remove the second part, which is reporting to the House. So there is I will reject that point of order. I think it's in order. So the sub-amendment that Mr. Arya is proposing would be that the basically the motion would read that consistent with the motion passed by this committee on Monday, October 28, 2024, the committee summons Rogers Chief CEO Tony Staffieri to appear before the committee for a minimum of 2 hours within 7 days following the adoption of the motion. That would be it. So that's the sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Arya. On the sub-amendment, and then I'll get back to the list once we've dealt with this. And I have, so on the sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Arya, which is removing reporting to the House, I have Mr. Perkins and then MP Rempel-Garner.
I thought MP Arya was bang on until he wrapped up his concluding paragraph, which was to neuter this. This individual, Staffieri, has stuffed and stonewalled this committee all year, 3 times. He's got better things to do in his little office on Bloor Street than to come and be accountable to the people who represent all Canadians. And I've had enough. And he needs to know the consequences of ignoring the summons again. If he ignores it, he's going to be admonished and brought to the bar of the bloody House of Commons. I've had enough. And for the Liberals to go and say, oh no, let's give him a 4th chance, let's give him a 5th chance. How many times do you have to be kicked in the you-know-what by this guy before you actually say, I've had enough? I've had enough. Yeah, I'm bloody mad. I'm bloody mad that these guys are so contemptuous of Parliament that they're above it, earning their $10, $20 million a year, that they don't need to lower themselves to come here. The last time he was here, he lost his Zoom call because he didn't have the guts to show up in person, and I dare him when he's a summons to have the guts to show up here instead of sitting in his office in Toronto with his faulty Wi-Fi, which collapsed in the middle of the last time he was here. Thank God he had access to bells, I guess, because that's how he must have got back on the committee. Like, this is pathetic. And the fact that every member of Parliament and every Canadian isn't outraged at the arrogant nature of this individual who refuses to be held accountable to Parliament when Parliament gives him the spectrum that allows him to do what he does in overcharging Canadians. So to remove this is, to me, the worst possible signal you could send to this individual.
Thank you, MP Perkins. I'll just let's be mindful of the tone and the words that we use with regards to Mr. Staffieri as well. But I understand the frustration, though. But just please tread carefully, colleagues. MP Rempel-Garner.
I agree with the need to have a punishment or an admonishment attached to this motion for the following reasons. I guarantee you right now, the legal counsel and the GR team at Rogers is saying there's no penalty associated with avoiding a summons, so we're just going to blow it off again. I guarantee you that's what's happening. And if you don't believe me, all you need to do is ask millions of Canadians. I have someone who's very close to me who went for, I believe it was 3 weeks without internet. They were on hold multiple times with Rogers, had multiple technicians, were charged multiple times. This is somebody who is a very intelligent person and very determined. But their customer service essentially was built on the principle of we don't need to do anything. We are going to go to the ends of whatever contractual or legal obligations we have and then try to violate that. They do that with their customers, and now they're doing it with parliamentarians. And colleagues, if we do not have some sort of admonishment attached to this, I guarantee you that is what this company will do, again, with its CEO. They've blown us off 3 times. So we have to, and again, just to the company, I cannot believe that the company has made me, as a parliamentarian, spend 2 hours debating this motion this morning. I am so furious that my time has been wasted in this way, that they think that my time is worth nothing. But I guess I want to equate it back to their customer service level. If they're willing to make tens of millions of Canadians wait on hold for an endless amount of time for customer service, why should we expect anything less? So, colleagues, it's very important that we have that admonishment attached on here so that when their legal and their GR team go back and say, should we put him in front of this committee or not, they have to at least weigh the corporate reputational brand damage of having a parliamentary admonishment to a company that heavily benefits from government intervention through regulation, through direct subsidy and other incentives. So I just really want to reject Mr. Aria's assertion. I do think that we have to escalate to this. I think going back to the motion as amended between Mr. Massey and Mr. Perkins works well, and let's get on with life. And I really hope that this man, I hope he apologizes to everybody on this committee. I certainly would love an apology. A personal apology for wasting my time and my staff's time, and also, frankly, the time of 120,000 or so people that I represent. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Rempel-Garner. J'ai Monsieur Aria, suivi de Monsieur Patzer.
Mr. Aria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't support this amendment.
Sorry, Mr. Massey, the order is I have MP Area, then you. MP Area.
Mr. Chair, I know that if the summons is not honored, then we can take the next step. But summons carries much more weight than a plain invite. So I think we should give its due. Otherwise, then we are diluting. Every time every committee issues summons, we also have to attach the next a threat that if we don't honor this, we are going to do this. So my thing is that let's issue the summons. I think if there's the management team at Rogers have got slightly above average intelligence, they understand the seriousness of it. And I think they, at least in my opinion, they will oblige. If they don't, then obviously we can take the next step.
Thank you, MP Area. MP Massey.
Yeah, I can't support the motion or the sub-amendment, this being in a couple reasons. First of all, Rogers' management team had no hesitation, like this committee is showing right now, when they decided to enact weasel words in clauses to increase the cost of consumers on this. And, you know, you look at the response that's been taking place from Rogers on this practice, and if you're a single mom that has to go to work and you don't have 2 to 3 hours to be on the phone to actually try to get your bill corrected or put down lower or live it up to the original contract that you expected when you signed, or if you're English as a second language or person with a disability, their response to this has also created a privileged system to reward those that could fight for their rights to get lower costs versus demographically challenged individuals who can't have the same luxury of time because they're not either semi-retired, fully retired, or can spend endless hours or have consumer advocacy skills that can meet the professionally trained individuals on the other line of the phone. So with that said, I just want to move on. And I think any time that we delay on this, and the seriousness of it is very significant because it's a social justice issue to me as a New Democrat, as much as it is a pocketbook issue for Canadians and consumers. And so the failings of this is not just the costs of the box related to your personal contract. It's also a societal cost of putting winners and losers out as Canadian citizens because of their skill sets related to being how they can defend themselves and their families from these contractual arrangements that can be manipulated, not only put in, the fine print, but also too, later on the phone, how the fine print is then actually measured and determined on your final bill. It's all wrong. For all those reasons, I support Mr. Perkins' amendment on my original motion, and I don't support this one that's being put forth because it's this serious. And I want to move on, and I don't want to be sending signals that we have some type of, reservation about doing what we can do, because perhaps What we're suggesting here, has to go even farther, which I'm prepared to do.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Massey. We're still on the sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Area, and looking at my list, I have Jeremy Patzer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I would just say to Mr. Area, Area or Aria? I got in trouble for saying Aria? Okay, I got in trouble for saying somebody else's last name wrong unintentionally the other day, so I just wanted to make sure. So, I don't want to waste another meeting having to draft another motion to make another request. Well, I guess it'd be for him to come to Parliament for an admonishment after the fact, right? Because we've already seen what happens when we've seen people already ignore a summons to committee in this Parliament, in other committees. It's been done. So I think let's show them what transparency looks like, and that, hey, guess what? We have a motion. Here's the consequences if you don't show up. It's going to be an admonishment. You're going to be dragged to the bar in Parliament, and we're going to deal with this right then and there. Maybe we could scribble into some little fine print at the bottom of the motion there, so that way nobody will read it. Maybe that would work, just so that we could do the same to them what they're doing to Canadians when it comes to jacking up their prices on they're supposed to be on a fixed contract. Maybe that would be a good way to go about it. I don't know. But to the points my colleagues have already made, there needs to be something written in here to show that there are consequences. I mean, it's good to go straight to the summons, but there needs to be something backing that up right behind it. So I think we need to write a very strong, compelling motion that says that this committee and Parliament means business. We're not just something to be ignored, or not just something to be pushed by the wayside, but that we take it seriously what's going on, and there are consequences for the behavior that we are seeing from the CEO of this company. And I think that we should demonstrate to them, how you put what your intentions are. You put it right here on paper, and you make it loud and clear, so that there's no misinterpreting and there's no confusion as to what we mean. And we'll show them what it means to communicate clearly. And we need to clearly communicate that if you do not show up, you will be brought before Parliament and you will be dealt with.
Yeah, in order for that to happen, I think the filibuster would need to stop, though, so that's something to keep in mind. MP Van Bynen.
At your suggestion, Mr. Chair, I will be brief. Number one, I think we should follow due process, and I think that as a committee we shouldn't allow our anger and our assumptions lead to what's being said in this amendment. I think we should follow due process, and we are now giving Mr. Leach an opportunity to speak truth to power. I'm sure that he's going to let Mr. Staffieri know the mood of this committee, and I'm sure he's going to let Mr. Staffieri know the tone and the intentions of this committee. But I think we're jumping the gun with the amendment that talks about the interim report, because we're making the assumption that he's not going to respond to the summons. And I don't think that's appropriate, so I would support the amendment.
Okay, the sub-amendment to be clear by MP Area.
Thank you.
So, colleagues, I have no more speakers on my list. So I will ask for the clerk to put the sub-amendment to a vote.
Mr. Aria. Yes. Ms. Bradford.
Yes.
Mr. Badaway.
Yes.
Mr. Gahir.
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Yes.
Mr. Perkins.
Absolutely not.
Monsieur Genereux.
No.
Mr. Patzer.
No.
Ms. Rempel-Garner.
No.
Monsieur Savard-Tremblay.
No.
Mr. Massey.
No.
Okay, so the sub-amendment is rejected, and this brings us back to the motion as amended, which brings us back to the amendment to the motion. And I had two more speakers on my list. I have MP Badaway and then MP Gahir.
Quick question is all I had. The UC that we passed last meeting
had other names on it. Have we heard from those individuals?
Yes, they have been invited. We've gotten an accusé de réception, but no firm date. However, they are invited as part of this study. So Bell and TELUS are also invited. My hope as chair is that we could get them all together because time is running out. So within the next 7 days, ideally.
Thank you.
And I think it will not be lost on Bell to listen to what's happening at this committee and perhaps to be more
That's one of the reasons why I asked the
perhaps
question.
to be more responsive than they've been thus far.
They can be part of a future motion.
Thank you. MP Gahir.
Thank you, Chair. I had the same concern as MP Vance that we haven't received any communication from Bell or TELUS, and we passed a UC motion obviously last week to invite them as well. So I'm wondering whether, in your judgment, you think we should amend this or sub-amend this motion to include them, or we wait and see what happens?
I think it would be premature, given that we passed this motion on to invite Bell and TELUS last Thursday, and they were invited last Thursday. Whereas in the case of Rogers, we passed the motion at the end of October, and we've had discussions through the clerk to make sure that Mr. Staffieri would appear on November 28th before this committee. And at the very last minute, he canceled his appearance before the committee. So I think it would be premature, but know that they are invited as part of the study, Mr. Gahir.
Sure. So I do think that if they appear together, that would be useful, right? If the CEOs of the different companies appear at the same meeting, because I think the questions are going to overlap, obviously.
Yeah, that is my understanding too, as I've just outlined. Thank you, MP Gahir. Are there any other comments on the amendment? Do I need to put it to a vote, or is there unanimous consent on the amendment proposed by Mr. Perkins as sub-amended by Mr. Massey, removing Mr. Baines? We're good? Okay, so it is adopted unanimously, which brings us to the motion as amended. And I think it is also, looking at the room, it is also passed unanimously. So thank you very much. This deals with that. Mr. Perkins, are you going to move another motion unrelated to the topic? Then I will liberate Mr. Leach, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I do hope you relay what you've heard to Mr. Staffieri. As I've mentioned in my opening remarks, a lot of resources go behind the organization of these committee meetings, and it's a solemn occasion for to answer to Canadians through MPs, and to cancel at the very last minute, I think you've heard it loud and clear, is quite disrespectful. So I hope we'll be able to hear from Mr. Staffieri in the next 7 days. So thank you very much for your presence today, Mr. Leach, and I wish you a good day. Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a motion on notice that I'd like to move with regard to Telesat. It's been there a while, but so somebody might have to propose a slight amendment to it. I can't propose amendment to it since it's on it because of the timing issue. I would suggest somebody look at that, one of my colleagues, when we do it. So the motion I will move is that in relation to the Government of Canada's recent $2.1 billion loan to Telesat, that the committee agreed to hold 2 meetings examining the feasibility and business case justifying the deal over 2 meetings within the 14 days following the adoption motion. That's the part that'll have to be amended. And that the committee agreed to invite the following witnesses. I think we may have had some chat on this before. And I think number A had been corrected by MP Turnbull about who the current deputy minister is of ISED, as well as B, Daniel Goldberg. I don't think we voted on it, did we? I think it was suspended, or was it?
I'll just verify with the clerk to be sure, because I believe that we had dealt with that issue. But let me just verify. I'll take a minute, colleagues. Okay, yes. Thank God someone's paying attention.
No.
Monsieur le Président,
So, oui,
on
monsieur.
a reçu un message.
Chair, the interpreters told us that the motion has not been translated into French. But I think it was already adopted. Can it be sent to the interpreters? It was already carried, but my recollection is that we delayed this question. But can we just ask our friends to send the French version to the interpreters? Just 1 second, Mr. Tremblay. If it's already been carried, all this is moot. That's what I mean. And the clerk cannot do two things at the same time.
Juste une seconde, on va.
Just 1 second. We'll just suspend for a brief instant.
Moot, given the motion was adopted last Thursday. Mr. Perkins, you still have the floor.
Thank you. I will move to resume debate because I don't believe we voted on the motion I had on MasterCard production of documents. Members will recall as part of the credit card study that MP Massey put forward, we had MasterCard and Visa here, and we had some discussion around the government support for the cybersecurity center and the $50 million that MasterCard received from taxpayers during that meeting. So just to remind members that the motion that we tabled and believe began debate on but did not vote on was that the committee order the production of all documents, emails, memos, and any materials related to the Liberal government's $50 million handout to MasterCard, including all communications between ISED, PCO, and PMO with MasterCard regarding the grant, and that the committee report to the House to express its concern with regarding the value for money of the taxpayers on the nearly $50 million of taxpayers given to MasterCard by the Liberal government.
Okay. Thank you, MP Perkins. We had we started the debate on this, but then it was adjourned. The meeting was adjourned.
I think
Yes.
that's what
Okay.
But I'll check with the. Is that correct?
Yes. I'll just suspend for a minute to make sure that all MPs have it before their eyes. So, je veux juste m'assurer que ça soit envoyé, Monsieur Sartre-Tremblay. D'autant.
I just want to make sure it's been sent to you. You weren't here when the matter was discussed, so we'll just suspend for a second.
D'accord, ça sera pas long. Donc.
It won't be long.
Okay, so we'll resume debate on the. Oh, I hear myself on the motion proposed by Mr. Perkins that he's read into the record. And do I have any speakers on the motion that Mr. Perkins has presented? Et je veux juste être sûr, là, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, que vous avez bien.
And I just want to make sure, Mr. Savard-Tremblay, that you've received. You received the motion. You have it? Yes. And since you opened the door to me saying a few words, I have a question to ask of Mr. Perkins, if I may. So, spontaneously, I would say I'm not very warm to the idea, but I'm open to being persuaded. It just seems to be a classic subsidy in research and development. Spontaneously, it doesn't seem to be any big problem here. But if you start doing this for every subsidy for research and development, we'll never see the end of it. I know MasterCard has a near monopoly. I understand that. I don't have any difficulty with that. But Mr. Perkins, my question is, where does this come from? Is there something behind this? I'm open to being convinced.
Thank you for the question. It's a good question. This wasn't research and development. What this is when we began the credit card study here, MasterCard and Visa were here at the committee, and we questioned the executives of MasterCard about I'll call it, what are the basics of your business? One of the basics of their business is making sure that credit card holder information is safe. Using cybersecurity. In fact, this is a company that had $26 billion US in revenue last year, and they announced a cybersecurity center, basically doing the security that's required as part of this in Vancouver, and the government threw them $50 million to help do it so they could be at the announcement. But I actually didn't do anything. They were going to do this anyway. They were required to do this anyway, as part of offering their services. When asked if they had been offered money from any other country, they said no, they were just going to locate it here anyway. Education, quality of the workforce, all of those things. And when Visa was asked, who were sitting right next to them, whether they had ever taken government money to do the ante up at the poker game, which is securing and providing cybersecurity for your customers, Visa said, no, we would never take government money for that. So I haven't seen an adequate rationale from anywhere, from the government on any of the papers or from MasterCard as to why a company with $26 billion US in revenue, a company with $11 billion in gross income last year, US, a company that has to provide security to their customers or no one would carry their credit card, needs $50 million from the taxpayer to do what they're supposed to do as part of their business. And there were no adequate answers from the executive other than to say he was proud of the center. There's been no adequate explanation in the 2 or 3 years since this was announced by the government of why they were doing it other than, hey, there's a center opening up and we get to be at the announcement. So here's a check for $50 million so the Minister Champagne can stand at the announcement and say, look what I did. I did something that was going to happen anyway, but in order to make you think that it didn't happen, it wouldn't happen without me, I'll give him $50 million when one of the richest companies in the world doesn't need Canadian taxpayer money. In fact, for those who were in the meeting, I asked if he would pay it back, since it's not going to anything other than what they already do in their business. And he mumbled and bumbled, and of course, it's sort of like when Loblaws took $18 million for fridges. Aren't fridges sort of the requirement if you're going to sell milk? I know they are at a convenience store. I'm sure they are at the largest grocer in Canada. Yet the richest company in Canada with over $40 billion a year of revenue thought it was appropriate to take $18 million from Canadian taxpayers to pay for something they have to have anyway, fridges. Otherwise, I'm not buying Loblaws milk if it's not sitting in a fridge. So why would I buy a MasterCard, or why would I have subscribed to MasterCard if they're not protecting my security and have the latest cybersecurity? There's absolutely no requirement whatsoever for MasterCard to take taxpayer money to do what they have to do in order to operate their business.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, ça serait...
Mr. Savard-Tremblay, did you have any other questions about this? Not so far, but I guess there'll be an exchange, so I'm looking forward to hearing other people's remarks. Mr. Garon expressed a certain number of concerns about this motion in the past, but just to remind you, colleagues, that this goes back a bit, and parliamentary life being what it is, sometimes we forget there was an amendment that had carried that took out the word liberal, the term Trudeau liberal government, and that amendment carried. And so when you're looking at this motion, keep that in mind. I have two names, Mr. Van Bynen and Mr. Balloway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would propose that we remove as an amendment, that the committee report to the House to express its concern regarding the value for money and taxpayers, because I believe it's premature. We haven't seen these documents. We haven't had a chance to review them. I think we also need to think about the fact that we are in a global marketplace. There was a $510 million investment on behalf of MasterCard to establish the center. And this is an organization or a corporation that can go anywhere. And so in terms of providing an incentive to create the jobs, I don't recall the number of jobs that were created as a result of that. I see now here it's around 270 jobs by 2029. There's times that we need to be competitive. There's times where we need to create incentives in order to have these global corporations that have liquid capital that can move anywhere around the world to establish themselves in Canada, to create employment in the areas that they've located in Vancouver. And so let's make sure we get all the facts before we again jump to conclusions, as we did with the other recommendation. So I would move that we delete the second portion of that.
Okay, donc you've all heard, colleagues, the amendment proposed by MP Van Bynen, which the motion would end after regarding the grant, and the rest would be removed. So on the amendment, now on my list I have MP Balloway, Massey, and Patzer, but now I'm going to start a new list on the amendment proposed by Mr. Van Bynen. Mr. Patzer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think it'd be good to keep that in. Otherwise, it's just kind of a ubiquitous motion at that point. So much like we heard earlier with Rogers, it's good to have a little something else at the end of it to provide a little bit of, I guess, extra motivation for the government to produce these documents. Last week at the meeting, there was a dump of documents that came that were just literally copy and pasted off of the government website and sent in, and then there was a code of conduct thing that was sent in that was unrelated. And we were told, oh, those are the documents. Well, no, those were not the briefing documents that were prepared. So there's a lot more information that is needed on this. But let's just look at the witness testimony that MasterCard gave when they were at committee, just to address one of your other points. You're making it sound as if this money was needed to secure the data center in Vancouver. MasterCard said no. We selected Vancouver for a very specific and strategic reason. We were going to build it regardless. And they were a little bit cagey about as to whether they asked for the money or whether the government just approached them and gave them the money. They were just more focused on saying, well, this was a job-creating avenue. That was it. They didn't want to say one way or the other. But they said they were building it regardless. And when they were asked, did anybody else offer you money to build in their country instead? They said, no, No, nobody else did because we solely picked Vancouver to be the location we were building this data center. They also said that they had other places built around the world that they built on their own without government money in other countries. So why on earth did the minister decide to just randomly chuck $50 million at MasterCard? That's why we need to get the information here to understand, was there a request? Was there a specific rationale behind it? And if there wasn't, then of course the House, we want to express the concern to the House of the value for money that taxpayers got over $50 million that wasn't needed when Mr. Perkins said one of the richest companies in North America had no need for it because they're building it regardless. They wanted to do it because they knew that they needed to do it, and they definitely have the wherewithal to be able to build this without taking taxpayers' money. So I think that we should keep the wording in there as it is. But I think based on the witness testimony that we received, there's enough to go off of here as well too. So, but yeah, we just want to see from the government what was the communication back and forth. Whose idea was it to do the $50 million, and what was the rationale from the government to do it? Because we heard from MasterCard that they didn't need it. So why did the government give them $50 million? That's why we need these documents.
Merci, Monsieur Aria, sur ma liste sur l'amendement.
Thank you, Mr. Aria, on the withdrawn amendment. Report to the House. Mr. Aria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, when it comes to technology companies, MasterCard may be a credit card company, but it's also a technology company. Most of the technology companies are big today. You take Ericsson, you take companies like Google. There are a lot of companies. For example, Ford is an automobile manufacturing company, but they got the Technological Development Center in Ottawa. So we need to invite, to make sure, to ensure that these companies who are leading technological development to be located in Ottawa. It is in the interest of Canada, in the interest of Canadians, that the technological advancement takes place here. As a developed country, we have to take measures to ensure that Canada is at the forefront of new technologies. And for the new technologies come most of the time from big companies like Google. So it is very important for us to go if I have to use a layman words, I think we need to chase these companies or go after them and convince them to come and set up operations here. When they do that, a lot of the experts, the engineers, the technologists who work in these companies, the knowledge that they generate here will be available to the Canadian society as a whole. I think that should be the approach. That should be the tone taken. It should not be that, if they wanted, let them go and invest in Seattle, not in Vancouver. I think that should not be the approach. I think we have to treat the companies with respect. We may have differences, obviously. We will have differences when it comes to MasterCard or any other credit card company charging undue amount to Canadian consumers. I think we should call them out. We should take necessary actions. But when it comes to technological development, I think we should treat them with due respect. And I do support the sub-amendment proposed by my colleague, Mr. Van Bandai.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Aria.
Thank you, Mr. Aria. On the amendment moved by Mr. Van Bynen, are there any speakers?
Amendment, which essentially is just removing the part that's report to the House. Et Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, je vais devoir juste vous, parce que là, il s'apprête à y...
Mr. Savard-Tremblay, please to get back to your seat because we're going to have a vote on Mr. Aria's amendment. On Mr. Van Bynen's amendment, rather, sorry, who wants to remove the wording reports to the House and everything after that. Mr. Patzer and no one after Mr. Patzer.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just really just wanted to speak again here because I think when being able to speak in the House of Commons on the $50 million that was given, I think is important, right? I mean, we do work on accountability here in committee, but something like this is well suited to be in the chamber as well. So I think we need to make sure that we have the ability to get this to the House of Commons. I do think it's urgent and relevant for Canadian taxpayers, especially when we look at, just the general cost of living crisis that people are going through, and you see the government wasting money on projects that were going to be built regardless. I do think it's relevant to the House of Commons. So I would love to see that last bit stay in this motion, and I will be voting no to it as well. Thanks.
Merci, Monsieur Patzer. Est-ce que
Thank you, Mr. Patzer. Are there any other comments on Mr. Van Bynen's amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we're curious about what the government's rationale was, we could invite members of the officials to appear before this committee and indicate to us why they had made that decision. That's number one. Number two, again, getting back to that we express concern over the investment without even looking at the facts of the investment. It's like saying you'll have the benefit of due process and fair consideration, after which you'll be found guilty. So the rationale doesn't fit with me, and that's why I think we should remove that. We'll have plenty of time to take other steps if the information that we're seeking leads us to conclude that that's an appropriate step. But to go to that step now, I think, is totally inappropriate, and it defeats the whole purpose of due process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Bynen. Mr. Patzer?
Yeah, sorry, just one more time here briefly. We did have the officials at committee, and they did not answer our questions around some of these questions. That's what was the impetus for this motion in the first place, because we did have officials at committee testifying to this, and based on the feedback they gave, and then based on the testimony received from MasterCard, there was still a void there. So we now have asked for the production of documentation because of that. So if officials would have been more direct in answering questions, then maybe we wouldn't have to do this, but they weren't. So now we need to ask for the production of documents. And yeah, anytime the government wastes $50 million on a project that was going to be built regardless, there was no threat of relocating or canceling the project, but maybe there was, and MasterCard denied telling us that. That's why we want to see these documents. And even if they did, then it'd be great to bring this to the House of Commons and talk about that, right? But the officials came to committee. They weren't clear. MasterCard, they did not have a great showing either. And so that now we need to have these production of documents. And of course, we should report to the House our concern over the government's handling of 50 million taxpayers' dollars.
Oui, j'ai Monsieur Savard-Tremblay suivi de Monsieur Van Bynen.
Mr. Savard-Tremblay, followed by Mr. Massey. I say this quite openly. I'm still thinking about the motion when it comes to producing documents, and for this reason, I think it's a bit premature to report to the House. If we observed that something was awry or amiss in the documents, I would be the first to say, let's report this to the House, and I would be more severe that we're concerned about value for money. I would say something more severe than that, but let's look before we tell.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay. Je laisserai la parole à Monsieur Massé avant de tourner à vous, parce que je pense qu'il se dégage, en tout cas.
But I think we're beginning to see how this will play out and what people's positions are.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Chair, the translation wasn't coming through. It's just a little lagged. I understand where Mr. Savard-Tremblay is coming from, but just a little going back to the history that you noted, Mr. Chair, and the reason why I won't support the sub-amendment, but do want to support the what's been proposed before that, is because if memory serves me correct, I took out the language that was really kind of a poke in the eye for the Liberals, and that passed to get us to the point where we could actually deal with this in this way. And had there been other concerns on other parts of this motion at that time, I thought it would have been raised at that point in time. And to be fair, I can't remember Mr. Van Bynen was there not. So I'm not trying to be negative to his attempt on this either. It's just that going back to where we were at and where we're here. And it is a good point that Mr. Savard-Tremblay is making about with regards to, why picking this one particular one out. It really came from the testimony that we got back from the officials and also from MasterCard. And I've seen enough of this to equally say that it's a big concern, and there's been some questions in the House and so forth. So for those reasons, I can't support the sub-amendment because I already come to the conclusion I necessarily need to see with all the information that we received already in the testimony of this committee and elsewhere. And then second to that is the original kind of how we got here reasons. Thank you.
Okay, just to refresh members' memory with regards to where we were when we ended the debate on this motion, and after the amendment that was passed by the committee, which you've just mentioned, MP Massé, the motion read that the committee order the production of all documents, emails, memos, and materials related to the government's $50 million commitment instead of handout to MasterCard, including all communications between ISED, PCO, and PMO with MasterCard regarding the grant, and that the committee report to the House. That was the motion. So what's being suggested by, the amendment proposed by MP Van Bynen is to remove and that the committee report to the House at the end. Just so we're clear, colleagues, on what's being proposed. So on the amendment, MP Van Bynen?
I'll pass.
Okay. So at this point, I have no more speakers on my list, so I will put the amendment to a vote. Madame la Greffière.
Madam Clerk.
Mr. Arya.
Yes.
Ms. Bradford.
Yes.
Mr. Badaway.
Yes.
Mr. Kahir.
Yes.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Yes.
Mr. Perkins.
No.
Monsieur Generer.
No.
Mr. Patzer.
No.
Ms. Rempel-Garner.
No.
Monsieur Savard-Tremblay.
Oui, mais je serai là si jamais on découvre quelque chose.
But I'll be the first to vote otherwise if anything's found out.
Mr. Massey.
No.
OK, donc l'amendement est adopté.
The amendment carries. So this brings us back to the amended motion. And on my list, I had Badaway, Massey, and Patzer.
Mr. Chair, I've been involved in a lot of communication dialogue with the development of economy, both throughout the country and, more importantly, within my riding. And a lot of those discussions are with respect to trying to incentivize development based on some of the programs that we have here federally, but as well matching those programs with our provincial partners and sometimes even with our municipal and private sector partners. So, and the reason why I say that is because, for the most part, when I look at these programs, I don't necessarily look at it with a political lens. I look at it from a business lens to ensure that with the incentives that we have available to us, it's going to meet the criteria not only of the program itself, which, by the way, is applied to and then through a matrix is scored, and then therefore either they get it or they don't based on the merits of their application. But I go back to my initial comments. It's the business of the government versus the politics of the government. And then, therefore, what's the return on the investment that we're going to get for Canadians? Regardless of who that company is, it's the merit of what the company is going to do and what the company is going to create, especially as it relates to the economy, which the SIF program attaches itself to in its whole purpose. This funding does go back to 2020, and quite frankly has nothing to do with credit card fees. But the context of it is that the federal government has enticed and worked with MasterCard Inc. to open a technology research and development center in Vancouver with a $49 million incentive through its Strategic Innovation Fund, the SIF program. no different than some of the economic development that I'm sure many have heard that we brought to Niagara and other parts of the country. The global payment network giant will fund most of the 510, and I'll repeat, the $510 million cost to create this center. Its sixth global R&D operation, Mr. Chair. It will focus on product development in digital and cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and Internet of Things technologies aimed at improving digital identification as MasterCard aims to enhance the security of its payment network from the growing threat of data theft and cyber fraud from increasingly sophisticated hackers. This, I might add, in the best interest of Canadians, and quite frankly, overall, as a priority of this government, and I can only say, I'm sure, a priority of most members of Parliament that sit in each and every chair in the House. The Centre will create 270 jobs by 2029 and hire 100 students on co-op work terms. This is what MasterCard said, and I quote, "The Centre in Vancouver's Old Exchange building is home to a new data security, a 100-person business specializing in biometric identification that MasterCard purchased in 2017. Mr. Chair, the funding was focused on creating technologies, as well as standards to ensure that Canadians and others around the world can safely use any device that could be connected to the Internet. Not only the Internet, but phone, tablet, computer, without concern that their personal and financial information could be stolen. In collaboration with universities,
I am sorry, MP Badaway, to interrupt this passionate speech, but the bells are ringing, and I would need a unanimous consent to pursue. Pardon me? I know. Yeah, the vote is in. The bells are ringing, but I still need UC to continue the meeting. Do I have unanimous consent? Yes. No, I don't have unanimous consent. Okay. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, colleagues.